Good afternoon. Glad to see you guys are a little cooler today than you were yesterday. Basically, we discussed, and I don't think we have a resolution yet on our offer on nearly 50% of the budget. It is, again, looking at the kids, the cops, and the courts, to quote Senator Koch. But it's also 50% of the budget that we can agree on and get beyond, and then go to the other points of the budget, or nearly 50% of the rest of the budget. Went again through some of the areas that are of high importance for us, which would be, of course, K-12 classroom funding, but also then again looking at where, from a standpoint of common ground we can find. And I think in what we saw was a definite move from our position on $80 million in education, which is probably one of the biggest portions of the budget, but one of the most important things for us as a state of Minnesota. We pride ourselves on education. A special session is not necessary, and a tax increase isn't necessary. This is the biggest budget in the state of Minnesota's history. It should be enough to fund our priorities, because again, if everything is a priority, then nothing is a priority in the state of Minnesota. We have got to set some priorities and manage within those priorities our state budget.
Now, touched on a little bit, we backtracked on some of the meetings that occurred earlier today, Health and Human Services and State Gov. Obviously, two areas of the budget where I think it's safe to say are, what I would say are probably the two biggest sticking points. And I expressed concern that I'd like to see more, if the governor is not going to be attending those meetings, that then the commissioners need to be more empowered. They've been somewhat instructive in highlighting the differences, but I think there needs to be more empowerment of commissioners for negotiation purposes, and I expressed that to the governor. I think there was perhaps some agreement, it's fair to say, in that, and highlighting those big issues. We pushed on the public safety and K-12 education, because I think that's important to all of us, and that's important to the people of Minnesota, and could have 50% of the budget done, but still needing to recognize that the other 50% of the budget, and we have some have some of these big sticking points, which are HHH and State Gov, and we were just pointing out that those areas need to be addressed. We need to take the big chunks of those areas and and find some resolution on those. So, from a spending perspective, which is what we've always been saying, you can talk about revenues and how much, but unless you're talking about where you're spending it, I don't think your conversations are going to be very constructive. So we need to know where the $34 billion is going, and if the governor wants another $1.8 billion in taxes, or 2.4, or whatever the number is now, where he intends to spend it. That's incredibly important for our members, and it's incredibly important for the people of Minnesota. Question?
So it sounds like you're open to revenue now? You said if he wants to raise the taxes, you need to know where it's going.
What we would talk about now is we need to look at, again, goes back to what we've always been saying, go into these different areas of the budget, find out where the governor's concerned are, find out where our priorities, approach it from a spending perspective. What are we spending? How much are we spending? From that perspective, if the governor, so for example, K-12, the governor had an $80 million price tag when he originally came in. Now you could split that. We could have come in and said, okay, well, Governor, you wanted 80 million more. Here's 40 million. You could approach it from that way. In that case, we decided, you know what, Governor, we're going to give you that one. That was you want it. You said more money to K-12, no excuses, no exceptions. In the spirit of goodwill and compromise, we're going to just give you your entire number there. And along with public safety, everything you addressed in your veto letters, let's get half the budget. Let's just take that off the table. Done and done. And let's focus on the other half. So it's a different approach, and I think it's an important distinction, because it is about the spending. And one thing we know about state government is spending too much. It has been spending too much, and it is forecast to spend too much. Particularly in these times when everyone else is tightening their belts, that's the approach that we would like to see on the budget. Instead of sort of this, I called it budgetary sleight of hand. Oh, look over here. Let's find a number on the revenue, and what does that look like? It's about the spending.
A sense of urgency to get this done. Obviously, everyone is looking at July 1st. You've had several meetings. It doesn't sound like you've made any more progress today than you have yesterday.
Well, I think there was some big progress this week. I mean, I think you could look at 50% of the budget and say, all right. And so if we can, have 50% this week and 50% next week, we're feeling pretty good.
Well, I would say, Rachel, we've felt an urgency to get this budget done since we started in January. I mean, this is our job. We believe that the largest budget in the state of Minnesota's history, which this is a priority that we needed to work on. That's why we moved the schedule up. That's why we reduced the committees. That's why we spent a lot of time in November and December of last year organizing the session so that we could come to a conclusion much more quickly than we have in the past. Unfortunately, the governor and his commissioners have not seen fit to come and negotiate when we were in regular session. We're not in special session right now, but we're continuing to work. So there has always been an urgency for us to get this done, to get the budget balanced on behalf of the citizens of the state of Minnesota.
So if you took the approach that you laid out, Senator Koch, the way you would like to do this, if you did that, and at the end of it, say it all added up to $35.5 billion, would that be possible, or are you still locked on the $34 billion total?
We don't believe that we need new revenues for this. We have a 6% increase in our budget, and we believe that that's enough. But you need to start those. You have to have those discussions. That's where you have to start. And for example, we proved that with 50% of the budget. We could do that with money available and with it's in the checkbook.
But the only way this gets done is if the governor ultimately agrees to go down to $34 billion. Is that the case?
Well, this is what we are. This is how we're trying to frame our discussions with the governor. There's no need for a tax increase. There is no need for a shutdown. We have put together a calendar that includes a special session at the end of June. We are committed to that calendar. We're committed to the discussions that lead up to that. Now, what has happened in the economy since we officially left this place a couple weeks ago? Every economic indicator is flashing red. Every economic indicator is flashing red. There's some people that talk about the national economy in a coma. So we are not going to pile more taxes and double-digit government spending on top of an economic coma. We're not going to do that. We shouldn't do that. Taxpayers don't want us to do that. Our economy can't handle that. Our economy can't handle that. So we're going to keep meeting, we're going to keep working, and we're going to get back to talking about growing the state economy, and we're going to get back to talking about reforming state government. That's what needs to be a piece of this. Sometimes we're getting stuck on the math. But you talk about our K-12 offer. Yeah, the exact number's important, but what's more important is that we have 21st century world-class schools. That's what you want a K-12 bill to result in. Why do you do a public safety bill first? Because we want Minnesotans to be safe. That even in a tough economy where budgets have to be reduced, you claim and make this a priority. So that's what our discussions are going to continue to look like.
Yeah, we brought up, there was a recent article in the Wall Street Journal on the work that's being done in the state of Oregon, the state of Washington, in the way of waivers, which we've been talking about for months. Now, it's debatable on what you're booking in savings, but those reforms are incredibly important to Minnesotans and members in making things sustainable going forward. And that was part of our discussion today. That was a bill that passed just recently, and since we've left this place, bipartisan support with a Democrat governor. And so we once again brought that up to the governor in the context of talking about health and human services. So.
Offer go to the governor's budget plan in terms of his targets from February or from March, or does it go to where he is in terms of these veto letters? Because there's some concern that he's saying, there's some folks who are saying, well, they're $30 million, you guys are $30 million short on public safety. So I'm just trying to figure out where your offers are and how this works going forward.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that that's some concerns that we have as well. And discussions we're having with the governor. Are you talking about your March numbers? Sometimes that's the context. Sometimes it's the May 16th budget framework number. And I think you heard some of those discussions in the LCPFP as well yesterday. So it's a great question for the governor. What numbers are we using? Because there are references to several areas, whether it's the March numbers, whether it's the May numbers. All we can do is glean. Right, well, we have to do on what we have. And so we based the education number off of the number that we had from the governor's budget. We said we're coming all the way. And then very clearly we based the public safety number off of the veto letters. And we talked about that with you when we came out with the offer on Monday. We were we were very clear on that that was based on what we could glean from the governor's veto letter, trying to address what we saw as, or assumed were his priorities in that veto letter.
Tom, I'm just a follow up on that, Tom, too. That is, and if you guys can help us out with that, that'd be great. But what it also assumes in that new 208, I think that's probably what you're talking about, that new 208 million, assumes then $128 million in cuts from the governor. Yes. So, which is a little sleight of hand. It's a little difficult, and maybe that's the point. I'm not going to be that cynical, but what we have met the governor on is his budget target, not on his budget target plus someplace where he would make cuts that have been undisclosed yet. So all we can do, and you know, in a former accounting major, I can base stuff off a spreadsheet I look at. The spreadsheet that we saw that we based a number off of then is that $80 million number. So the additional 128, which he has said is not going to come from revenue, in other words, a tax increase, it's going to come from cuts. So from our standpoint, our earnest offer is addressing, at least in education, that exact number that he had, that he put down his priority. Again, that's our priority, his priority, met. The public safety number, we didn't have that ability. You know, we totaled up what we saw in the veto letter because, again, Commissioner didn't necessarily give us all of the where the pressure points are, where the priorities are, where the concerns are. So we based that off of a budget letter. We also did that with education, but we were, I call that belt and suspenders. This is just belt on public safety. But we've been able then to meet the governor on his numbers or his priorities on two different issue areas. In addition to the courts, I think in the courts we've been almost the exact same number since we started. So that one's been pretty easy.
Have you been any more specific on the policy that the governor objected to in your original bills on education or public safety? Has that been discussed in the meeting? And have you been able to be more specific on where you would get the $110 million from the rest of the budget?
What's that? I mean, again, some of the policy discussions have been brought up several times from a standpoint, I think from all of you, when it comes to race to the top. I know the commissioner has been very adamant about that. Some of the things that are in our policy bills that maybe weren't in the governor's proposal are going to be needed to complete that application. We went through that last time, and we've got I would say, a pretty firm warning from Secretary Duncan that we should do a little bit better on that, and we agree with him. That's why we put him in there. But from the standpoint of the governor has said until we get to the global number, we can't talk about some of that stuff. So we're willing to talk about that because once you get to whatever the number is, there's a boatload of policy in there that you've got to also go through. So we think it's good to do both at the same time. Have a two-track system here that we talk about both of those things.
Where you would get the $110 million?
Yeah, we've given various options on that, but we also then are pushing the governor on his $1.8 billion in spending. I mean, if that is going to be viewed as some sort of a proposal or an offer, we need specifics on that. And you can take that from either side of the ledger. We know what he's specifically raising for taxes. We have never gotten any kind of inkling, and maybe again, this is somewhere where you all could help us on, is what do those look like for the governor? If you tally up the veto letters, you get to more than that in spending. And then we're hearing that the veto letters are not maybe necessarily comprehensive or exhaustive reflection of the governor's objections. So then that's even more money. And so it would be extremely helpful to us to either know where the governor intends to spend his $1.8 billion or where he would consider his $1.8 in net reductions.
And point being is that we
could be I mean, there's all kinds. It could come from other areas, could be bottom line, could be in their tax relief. We've thrown up several areas out, but $1.8 billion would be helpful.
Point being, we've shown, we've put together, and we have passed our priorities, what our budget is. We asked the governor to do the same thing. I mean, obviously can't pass, but to show the detail. Give us a spreadsheet, give us the details, the line items. We've done that, and the game of the letters aren't comprehensive, but we got an idea. That needs to see some specifics to it. And again, we stand ready, willing, and able to negotiate all those points.
Members.
I may have missed this because it's hard to hear. Was there any agreement at all made today? Did you make any progress at all today?
Yeah, we pushed the governor. We pushed the governor on the K-12 public safety. That was the first order of business. We touched back on the Health and Human Services, which, it just depends on you to find. I think that is important. Some understandings were reached in Health and Human Services, or at least some discussions of the number. I don't know if Senator Han wants to characterize it, but that's particularly why Senator Han was, why we asked him to be here today, because that's the next big area. If we've offered 50% of the budget, let's move on to the next.
You didn't agree on this number, that number, this policy, or that policy. It's just understanding. That's the progress. Is that right?
Telling your employees in the House and Senate about a shutdown. How are you preparing them for a shutdown?
We've had some discussions on what that looked like. It's obviously 2005. There were state government budgets passed. There was at least around a third of the budget was already passed, which is not the case. We would recommend that could be the case. As we said, call us back, Governor, for K-12 and public safety, and then we could call us back for other areas of agreement. And we would continue to reiterate that. But we have to make preparations, just as all areas of government need to make preparations.
Furloughed, or can you be more specific on what's going to happen to these employees?
I don't want to get specifics until we've outlined that, but our intentions are to finish.
We want to be respectful to the next thing in there with the governor, so thank you, everybody.
Told your employees whether or not they'll be laid off?
We haven't, we've had some discussions internally, but not with our employees.
The state employee unions today said they're quite upset about some staff pool going on, about a betting pool on the shutdown length and date. And they want you to investigate. Have you looked into that at all?
You know, what I've understood from discussions, and it's incredible. I think we said it was colossally stupid. There was never any betting that took place. There was someone that put this piece of paper together. I think it was a very disappointing and wrong move. I think they realized that and they never went forward with it. And that has been the discussion. I think it's unacceptable, and we've made that clear.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.